All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining. I appreciate that. We'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully, Katz can get his or her way in here to join us. Um, so I'm gonna kind of pick up. We had a short meeting last week. There were only a few people that were there, so I'm gonna kind of pick up the same topic. So, Old Gravy Leg, this will probably be a little bit of a refresher course for you. But one of the topics that has come up recently is how the FPV Freedom Coalition should interact with the AMA. And the reason I ask is because obviously, as part of the community, I want to know your experiences with the FAA, or not the FAA, the AMA, and how it relates to how you feel the FPV Freedom Coalition should interact with them. So, what are your thoughts on that? How should we interact with the AMA? Anybody?
Yeah, I think we did talk about this a little bit last week. I think the best bet is to play nice, but
You
not
know,
necessarily
as
like get
cordially
in
as we
bed with them.
can. I mean, I don't have any experience with any members from the AMA, so I can't say how they act one way or the other. But I think working together is gonna help us out better um, to combat these laws that are coming down. So
Okay. Has anybody had a good experience with AMA members or bad experiences and kind of want to touch on those a little bit?
Okay, there we go.
Hey, you're in.
Yeah, I had to get my I had to find my microphone.
Well, welcome, sir.
Yes, I have dealt with the AMA a little bit and the FAA.
Okay, so talk to us about that.
Well, on the AMA, I used to be a member,
Okay.
and it was because they had a flight place around here. I mean, it wasn't close, but it was near enough. And I figured, go down there and talk with the people and mess around and fly at the time I had my Tundra. And they were hardly ever there, first off. They really never came to help or anything. And they frowned upon FPV. And I have found that most AMA fields do not want you flying FPV unless you, of course, have a dedicated spotter, which, that's legal. So, I mean, that makes
am I
sense. But
transmitting?
yes, you are. But that was my deal with them. And I didn't get any benefit out of having an AMA membership. So I dropped it. Just there wasn't nothing there.
Speaking of benefits, so what do you guys see as a benefit to the AMA? Like if
You
you
can
were
you can go to events because a
okay,
lot of events. That's the only reason people have it is so they can go there.
Yeah,
okay.
that's a good point.
So anything beyond that?
I'd say one benefit is that the FAA knows they exist and are willing to talk to them in some capacity.
Absolutely. So a
Yeah.
recognized CBO of sorts, right?
But as an
Yeah.
individual, I don't know if you've got that much pull or anything.
Right, right. And I think part of that is why, we're going to be having these town hall meetings is because we want to hear from you guys. I mean, those of us who are, working day in and day out with FPVFC, um, we can sit there and, you know, kind of decide how things should go, but that's not really the right way to do things. And that's why I want feedback from the community, from you guys. So, um, if so for FPV pilots, we're saying the only real benefit to an AMA membership is to be able to fly at events, right?
That's pretty much
So,
well it.
I mean, I know a lot of people say um, like insurance, but I don't know. From what I
That,
know, that falls under homeowners first, and that's supplementary. So I don't know if
Yeah, and
that's
their insurance also doesn't cover off-site. If you're at an AMA sanctioned event or designated flying area like an AMA club and something happens, you're exactly right about the insurance. Like they pay a little bit after, or they pay a little bit and then the rest goes to your homeowner's insurance if I could, or auto insurance, depending on the situation if I remember right. But if
right.
I'm out flying in the woods and then like I don't know, like hit a telephone pole or something, and it messes it up. AMA doesn't cover that. It's only at AMA sanctioned areas.
Okay. Excuse me for a second. I'm just taking some notes here. Let's see.
Beat them
And even
keys.
then, they decide whether they're gonna pay it or not. Like it's not just paid out. You can't just file a claim and everything's all right.
Yeah, they're gonna fight you on it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'd like to know what
Yeah,
the statistics are of how many claims have actually been paid out.
Not many, that's for sure, if any. And then of
yeah. I
course
haven't heard a whole lot of success stories with that.
they're gonna fight you every step of the way on were you following the AMA rules, and of course at that point, there's gonna be a problem at some point. So they're gonna get you.
Okay. So,
On that note, though, if you do want insurance, I believe it is State Farm that actually has a pretty good insurance for like drones and stuff.
really, State Farm has insurance for drones?
I believe it was State Farm. I was over there with the drone hangar and was talking with them and everything. And he's got it, and he was talking about it that he had it, and he's actually filed a claim and got reimbursed for a drone. So that
Yeah,
was
I have State Farm for house and auto, and I haven't had any real issues with any kind of claim I've had with them. So
yeah, it's pretty awesome.
yeah,
That,
that is cool. I'll have to look into that.
yeah, that brings up an interesting point that maybe the FPVFC should reach out to some insurance companies and maybe promote some of their options and see if we can negotiate something, but not really in the same way that the AMA does, but just kind of direct people there.
Yeah, maybe like a discount for membership or something like that. Would that be appealing to you guys?
That actually is not a bad idea.
Okay.
There are several companies that it's an app basically, and you have to have your location turned on, and it's maybe $6 an hour that you're covered. So if you're only in and out really quick, $6. The
Right.
only thing is based on your location, they tell you whether it's legal for you to fly or not. And if it's not legal for you to fly, obviously they're not going to cover you. And I don't know like what their specifications are for that. Um, I've looked into it as far as I can for the moment, without having the final law and ruling go into effect. It's really hard to get anyone that could potentially be responsible for paying large sums of money for you to agree to anything. So I've been working on that since October, actually. And I've found two companies that are, they're pretty decent to talk to, but they're still very, very, very unsure. And the ones that were okay-ish about it, the premiums were absolutely ridiculous. So I'll keep looking and I'll keep you guys informed.
Absolutely. That's good information, and what you guys are giving me is good for us to look into as benefits for the FPVFC. So I do appreciate that. So a couple of things. I don't know. Has anybody looked into the ops over people? Let me pull it up here. Let's see. So one of the things that has come out was there's two documents. One's a ANPRM and the other one's an NPRM, and both of them are dealing with one's kind of dealing with flights at night, and the other one's kind of dealing with flights over people, if I'm not mistaken. But one of them breaks out some categories for drone flights, and mind you, this is all part 107. But my concern is how it's going to roll over, or possibly roll over, to the hobbyist community. So let me post up these categories real quick for you guys. If you're not familiar with it, hopefully this will help you. So let's see if it'll post. Yes, it'll post all of it. So category 1 operations, they're limited to anything weighing under 250 grams. And basically, there's no real ruling on, any kind of impact numbers or anything like that, as long as it's under 250 grams. Category 2, must not cause injury to a person that is more severe than an impact that transfers 11 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. So I did some calculations, and 11 foot-pounds of kinetic energy is basically a 600-gram quad, which is about an average 5-inch. Would be traveling at 15.75 of a mile per hour, would impart almost 11 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. So 15 miles an hour. So for those of you who race, you can kind of imagine what that looks like, right?
Yep.
So, yeah.
You kind of see where I'm going with this, right? So a 300-gram quad would be traveling at 22.25 miles per hour. Cannot have any exposed rotating parts that could lacerate human skin, which basically means your propellers would have to be in a cage, and no defects present that would allow exposed rotating parts to become exposed during an impact, which basically means if at any time you crash and the cage around the propellers breaks, then you're no longer that quad would no longer be certified. That drone would no longer be certified. So it has to pass a rigorous testing to make sure that any design fits this bill. And this is for part 107. So this is all commercial operations.
That's gonna suck.
Yeah. So category 3 is a little more open, but it's basically the same thing except for 25 foot-pounds of kinetic energy. So a 600-gram quad traveling at 23.75 of a mile an hour, or a 300-gram quad traveling at 33 and a half miles an hour. So now I want you to keep this in mind. What aerial photography drone do you know that actually weighs 600 grams?
3-inch with a.
So you kind of see where I'm going with this. So I actually looked it up. A Mavic Pro weighs, what did we figure out the other day, Dan? Was like 1,500 grams? 1,200 grams?
Yeah, I'd have to look it up again.
Getting that Mobile HD.
Yeah. So, I mean, and think about it in terms of you're doing aerial surveys or something like that. But then think about how this could roll over and affect the recreational and the hobbyist community. So what is going to be our speed limit? What's going to be our transfer of kinetic energy if we crash? I mean, it's going to be a lot more than that, right?
70.
So
And death.
the other thing I wanted to post, and this is kind of funny because this article talks specifically about this, and it talks about how they came up with their numbers, how it's not exactly accurate. And I'm just going to briefly cover it. You guys can read it if you want. But one of the big things it talks about is when they came up with these calculations for this on the number of foot-pounds of kinetic energy it can transfer, they were referencing shuttle launches and the debris that comes off a shuttle. So, and more specifically, they're looking at solid metal objects that would hit a person. So, as we all know, aerial photography drones, if you're looking at a Phantom or a Mavic or any of the other off-brand drones, they're all made of plastic. Plastic flex when it hits something. So the way that it transfers kinetic energy changes drastically as compared to a heavy metal object. So, and that's what this article talks about. It goes into a lot of depth in that. So feel free to give it a read, but also keep in mind how these different categories of operations are going to affect it. And this is all based on operations over people. But we as hobbyists, we operate at least, a lot of people operate within the proximity of people if they're flying at parks or, diving a building or whatnot. Hopefully we're all being safe about it, but what's this going to look like when that kind of stuff comes out? So just something to keep in mind. Any questions or comments on this stuff?
Did you say that was only for 107 people, but it's going to make its way down, or it's only for hobbyists at the current moment?
No, it's only for right now. It's only for 107. Now, this isn't written in stone yet. This is a notice of proposed rulemaking. So I don't believe this one has gone to comment yet. Hasn't gone to comment yet, but it's coming. So as soon as they decide to publish this, they will open it up for comments for, I believe, 60 days. So, and we are getting ready to be able to comment on that and at least give the FPVFC stance on that, which obviously we feel it's a little ridiculous. But at the same time, we're trying to limit ourselves to focus on the hobbyist community at the same time, but we're also seeing how this could potentially roll over to the hobbyist community in the future.
I don't see why they don't just make it waiver based like it was in the past. I mean, it was so simple. It was like, hey, somebody's going to be flying over you. They have a waiver for it. Here's your heads up. And if something happens, it relies on the pilot's insurance because chances are it's probably going to be, I mean, most people that are doing it hobbyist-wise don't necessarily intentionally, like they try to not fly over people, you know what I mean? Or they're at an event, or there's an event that there's certain safety precautions, but I mean, a 107 pilot that's filming an event or something, you can't always you can't always do that. You can't always not fly around people. So I mean, that's where the waiver process was actually pretty good. You just apply for a waiver, it's signed, it's proof that yeah, you had the okay to be there doing what you're doing. I mean, it's not like a person couldn't get a waiver also, you know what I mean? Like a hobbyist.
Yeah. Right. I totally agree.
Yeah, it takes out this whole, I mean, just reading this stuff, I hate to say it this way, but it's bullshit. It's like 300. I don't care if you get hit with a 3-inch or a 5-inch. If that thing's hauling ass, it's gonna hurt.
Yeah, I've been hit by a 5-inch. It doesn't feel pretty, but I mean, it also didn't kill me either. So.
Right, exactly, and it's I don't know. I just feel like it's over analyzing something that the time could be spent. Well, not us, but the people that are proposing these rules to what's going on. It doesn't have to be. There's no time. It's everybody knows if you fly into a crowd of people, people are going to get hurt. It's the end.
Common sense.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I don't want something that weighs 100 grams going 100 miles an hour into me. It's gonna hurt. The same thing with, 1,000-gram quad going. I mean, I just built one of those nutmegs, the 2-inch version of the Squirt. That thing weighs like 600 grams. It's gonna leave a mark. It's gonna be like getting hit with a baseball, but it's not gonna kill you.
Absolutely. So let me clarify this. These category of operations, I believe they're for certification. So I don't know specifically how they're going to roll that out. I know there's a path to certification for equipment, which is basically your drone, saying these ones are allowed to fly over people. But I'll break that down a little bit further and get back to you on that. But it's kind of goofy. So also, I don't know if you guys saw today, Kitty Hawk announced that they're partnering with the FAA on the redesign of the Before You Fly app, which I guess is a good thing in some regards, because the Before You Fly app, how many of you have used that before?
Once.
Yeah, I mean, I have it on my phone, but that's when it decides to work, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell like what is it? I'm not familiar with this app. I knew how
Okay,
to fly
so
before apps.
so basically it's similar to like air map, but basically it tells you whether you're good to fly or not. It's got it lets you know if you're within range of like 5 miles of an airport or whatnot. You can actually put in a flight path in there to make sure you're all good. I believe, I'm not sure if it partners with Atlantic or not. I haven't used that. I've used AirMap for that, um,
Yeah, I
but
like air map much better.
yeah, the problem I have with these apps though.
And we lost him.
Oh,
Dead
okay. I thought
silence
it was
is.
me.
It seems like that's definitely a problem.
Hello, hello.
That's better.
Hello.
You're
Hey, you got me
you're
now.
back. Yep.
Okay, good. So, one of the big problems I have with these apps is that AirMap will tell you you're good to fly, and before you fly, it'll tell you you can't, or vice versa. And there's some things that show up on one, and some things that don't show up on the other. So it's kind of hit or miss, to the point where I've actually considered to have the FPVFC come out with their own app, but at the same time, I know Kitty Hawk was kind of in the running for remote ID, and they're kind of. I'm questioning if Kitty Hawk has won that bid for that contract. So we'll probably see that in the next couple of days with news, but we'll see how that rolls out. It's supposed to be out second quarter of this year, so hopefully it's a little bit of an improvement, but they're specifically, at least on their Facebook page, they're saying this is for hobbyists. So I'm curious what they're going to do with that to make it so focused on hobbyists.
Making what focused on hobbyists? The know before you
The
fly?
redesigned, yeah, the before you fly, the redesign of it.
Okay. I know Kitty Hawk was a guest on the Drone and Sundry show a week or two ago, and it was fun listening to what they had to say. And I know they also talked about having an API available, so maybe there's something we could do with that in the future.
What did they say on the Drone and Sundry show besides that?
Oh, they talked about how they had more accurate maps and the circles around airports changed to have the extensions at the ends of runways and things like that. Just how their technology
Oh, they
was
did
better than others.
yeah. The normal stuff. They added like bow ties, right?
Yes.
On the extensions. Okay, gotcha.
How up to date are those apps on TFRs? I've never used one, but I'm actually going to download it. It's not a bad thing, I guess.
The Kitty Hawk people talked about doing an update, I forget, it was every few minutes or every few hours on the app, so it was pretty regular, as long as you had an internet connection when you're using the app.
I've used it for Atlantic purposes because I know here in Phoenix, Sky Harbor is on the Atlantic system. So, and it worked pretty good. I mean, I got approval in a couple of minutes, so it didn't take that long. So, um, but I do know, like, I was down in Sedona or up in Sedona, I should say, and one area said that I was one of the apps said I was good to fly. The other one said I wasn't good to fly. So I just kind of had to guess on whether I was good to fly or not.
Well, you just always go with the one that says you can.
True story. I think that's what I did.
That's
the
what we
way to
call
do
a
it.
loophole.
Yeah.
That's why the
Reasonable
screenshot.
reliability.
That's why the screenshot button is so key. Right before you take off, be like, oh, look at this one. Delete the other app real quick.
There you go.
This one's for you, Stephanie.
Yes.
This was on the FAA's website. It's a link to a survey for people who live in Memphis on drones, and I found it completely laughable.
Why us? Like, I don't
Well,
understand why.
So the questions are, and it's actually part of Memphis International Airport, and it's a drone public opinion survey. So it says, what is your opinion regarding the use of UAS drones to conduct aircraft inspections? So we're so worried about drones at airports that we're going to start using them to do inspections of aircraft, of the security fence, of the ramp and perimeter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like a 9-question survey. So you should totally take that. But
Yeah, I just took it up. I'm using it's crap.
it's kind of
Oh,
hilarious.
it's very hilarious.
So I thought
I
I'd
definitely
chuck that in
take
for
that.
you.
They should use race quads. It'd be so much more efficient, and they'd be done in like a minute and a half to 2 minutes.
True
Yeah,
story.
really.
Yeah, they can just zoop on by and then review the GoPro footage for their inspections,
No,
frame by frame.
Just film in
That's
480,
a
like
horrible
1080,
idea.
480, and just go as fast as you can over the airport, and then check it out later in post.
They should
You're
have
right.
competitions who can complete it faster.
you got the what is it, a Falcor that does 1080p and a 720 downlink.
There you go. That's the way to do it.
Perfect.
And it's actually a race quad, sort of.
So
That's all so funny. It reminds me of the South Park episode from a couple years ago where people got drones and then the police got drones to catch the
that
people
was
flying drones, and then nothing, in the end the entire sky is just full of them.
You know, true story. The Yakuza started using drones to deliver goods across Tokyo. So the Tokyo police decided they were going to get drones to try to shoot them out of the air. Well, then the Yakuza were like, hey, you guys have things that can take us out of the air. We're going to take you guys out of the air. So now it's like Star Wars over Tokyo. And
That's
they
hilarious.
That is
have
hilarious.
been quoted as saying, this is the most fun I've ever had.
Drone
I
war.
can't believe this is my job.
Oh,
Are
that's
they
awesome.
registered at 300 grams or 600 grams when they get shot out of the sky and hit people?
I'm not even sure.
Depends on how good they get hit.
That's funny.
And how much their payload is. See, that's the thing. You got to figure out how much they're.
Oh,
So
they dump that.
the other funny thing is my fiance's her stepmom is from Israel, and she has a family member who works with the Israeli military, and they are using drones. And I don't know what type of drones. I'm supposed to be talking to this guy in the next couple of days, but they're using drones to take down explosive kites along the Gaza Strip.
What?
Yeah, so apparently,
I heard
yeah.
something about that. I think they're using those unique drones, like the knockoff ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
So
it's
this,
lower cost. Because you're literally flying into something that's going to blow up.
yeah, and so they use these kites to drop explosives along the Gaza Strip, and they're using drones to take them out of the air. So I'll be interested to see what they're doing with that, and so that'll be interesting.
One-way quad.
Right. All right. So let's see. Okay, here we go.
Oh man, that video is taking forever to upload.
What video are you uploading?
I just took an inductric switch and turned it into an FPV wing.
Nice.
Indoor FPV wing.
That's epic.
Dude, it was awesome.
I'm gonna have
And
to
it's
check
only
that
60 grams, by the way.
out. Hey, that's not bad. So you're a Category 1 operation, sir.
Woohoo!
So here is that NPRM for Operations Over People. If you guys care to give it a read, it is 206 pages long.
Dang, come on, why do they
I
always
am.
do that?
It's like, here, read this. It's a Bible. But I've read through a good chunk of it. A couple of us here have. But if you want to check that out, feel free. It talks about all the different categories, certification, requires for manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just so you're aware, that's out there. You now have a link to it. Feel free to read your life away on it. I think in terms of information for tonight, I think that's about it. What do you guys have for us? What can we help you guys with?
You guys might be able to tell me
Cue the
when I get
cricket
my
in the background.
107, do I get my $5 back from registering, and then I just
No, you do not.
re-register as?
No, you do not. You have to pay that registration fee regardless.
Yeah.
107 people have to do it. We have to do it.
I
Well,
never
no, I
got-
didn't know if the initial hobbyist like $5 transfers over when you get your 107, like if it
Oh
goes
no,
to
you don't
like
have
your
to, you don't have
first
to pay it
craft or
again.
whatever.
Yeah, you won't have to pay it again because it actually registers to you as the pilot and your craft. So it kind of goes
Right.
with.
But you don't get
If you're buying
$5
a
off
car,
the
you won't get
107.
$5.
No,
Yeah.
and the 107 requires you to register each particular aircraft too.
Right. Well, that's what
So-
I was wondering is if like you just get one of them for you just use your existing when you get your 107. I don't know. I mean, it's $5. I don't really care. I'm just curious.
Right now the difference is that you can fly under 336, the old 336, because we're not flying under the 342 yet. But you fly either under 336 or you fly under 107. So you would use one if you're flying recreationally. You would use your individual aircraft one if you're flying commercially. Does that make a little more sense for you?
Oh, so there is a difference between like if it's not once you're a 107 pilot, everything you're doing is a
107. No.
Okay, so it's not like that anymore.
No.
Correct.
No, it's if you're flying commercially, you're 107. If you're flying for fun, you're under 336 at this point
Okay,
until
cool.
they go live with the new stuff.
I did have one more quick question too.
Absolutely.
Remember back in the day, like we were all making jokes about how long it takes for them to come up with the testing and all that stuff.
Mhm.
Have they done that yet? Since they're like outside of the 90 days that they initially, or I think it was 180 days. I think they're.
No, they haven't. So that's gonna be due. Hang on a second, and I will pull up that timeline for you. Give me one
They
second.
had their hands full doing the math on the trajectory and
Yeah,
impact.
no shit.
And, like, they had to reach for that a little bit. So I think they got a little distracted.
So once the website goes live, we actually have all the deadlines for that, and that'll go live as soon as we hear back on our 501c3.
Yeah, I
So
see
give
there's
me
a lot of deadlines on that list that have since passed that I have not heard anything about.
I haven't heard anything on some of this stuff either. I know they've done some stuff with UTM, so we probably need to check that off.
It looks like the
it's pretty
safety
common
test
that-
is in April. The due
Yeah.
date's April.
Let's see.
Oh, thank God, I can be unsafe for 2 more months. Did
Okay,
now here's
so-
the joking one. Did everybody register? Does everybody have their registration number?
I do.
Oh, I
Yeah.
gotta go.
I've been
I gotta
registered.
go.
And
have to
printed on
leave
the
now, sorry.
outside.
Yeah, you can't have it in a battery compartment. It has to be visible from the outside of the aircraft now.
Been
In case
outside the
you're
whole
wondering.
time. Although not all mine are labeled, so
Yeah, you need to get
Well,
that because
like
if
a
you get
business.
stopped, you're gonna have an issue. April 3rd is when the aeronautical knowledge and safety test is due. So I am personally working on putting together a exam for that, and I think we're going to cover that in an upcoming meeting. Let's see. Actually, next week's meeting is going to be the knowledge exam and kind of getting your feedback on that. But in the meantime, I am working on putting something together, and my take on this is that it needs to not be the 107 test. It needs to be something a hobbyist needs to know, not something somebody flying commercially or general aviation pilot or anything like that needs to know. Because I mean, what 12-year-old is going to take the 107 test and succeed at it? So
Well, the way I look at
Happened
it
when he
is
was
it's
12.
the equivalent. It's the equivalent of a driver's license that we all have and a commercial driver's license. Like, I don't know all
Right.
the crap that they know. I don't need to know it, but I'm still, legal.
Right.
However, so I think that that's the way it should be. But does my opinion count? We'll see.
Well, and we're going to go to the FAA with this, and we're going to be like, look, we'd like to administer this. And we're creating ourselves as a CBO. We'd like to administer this for you guys, create it, help get it out there for the hobbyists. That way, it makes sense to our community. That way, we're not becoming 107 pilots, because I feel like that might be on the brains of some of these FAA guys, that why don't we just make everybody pass the 107 test? Well, what's that going to do for students and people in STEM classes and people just entering the hobby, kids entering the hobby, taking your 8-year-old out to go fly and whatnot. I get that they're going to fly under you, but they need to be able to understand this kind of stuff, and it needs to be brought to a level that people can understand. Does that make sense?
I
Yeah,
fully
exactly.
agree.
It
Yep.
does.
So
And plus, like, no kid's gonna want to take a test so that they can go out and fly. They're gonna be like, well, then I'm not gonna go flying then.
yeah, they'll
I mean,
find something better to do. They'll go turn on the video games, or go play on the tablet or whatever. So
yeah, they'll just fly
Whatever
in a
kids
sim.
do these days, pick
wow,
rock.
I sound like an old man. Jesus.
Yeah, you totally did.
Get off my lawn. All right. All right. So, what else can we do for you guys? So, just a quick update. We do have our 501c3 filed. We did hear back. It's in process of being processed. That's fun, because every time we call them, for the first couple times, their systems were down. We finally got a response that it's now being processed. So, once we get that, we're going to start talking to the FAA about becoming a CBO. Once we get all that done, the website's going to launch. We're going to launch a bunch of stuff. So, just FYI on that. That's where we're sitting right now in terms of organizational stuff. We're getting there. I know it's taking a while. I get that. But the government shutdown sure as heck didn't help anything. So we've actually been filed since the 3rd of January. So government shutdown really rolled us back a bunch. But what else can we do for you guys? What other questions, comments, anything? Doesn't even have to relate to tonight's topic. Feel free to just blurt them out there. If I don't have an answer, I will get you an answer.
The floor is open.
Well, if nobody else has anything, I've got one little thing that I wanted to point out. I'll post a document here that the White House released, and I found it interesting that the president is likening flying drones, using them in the same sentence and comparing them to cyber attacks as being equally dangerous to the national airspace.
I heard a groan.
So fun read.
Oh yeah, no comment.
Yeah, everyone attempt to keep your political comments intact at this point, because this meeting is being recorded and will be posted publicly later. And I'm fairly certain that I can say, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the majority of us are on the same page, and we're with you.
And I'm sure these are not direct words from the president, but somebody wrote it for him and he signed it. But
Of course,
the White House
yeah,
released this
that's
whole
the way we
thing.
go.
There's another thing too. I saw an article regarding banning of lithium-ion batteries shipments on passenger planes. So I would not be surprised. And then when they are being shipped via plane, that be at like 30% charge. And I would imagine that eventually is going to make its way to passengers carrying those as well.
Can you post where you found that?
I saw that somewhere
Yeah,
recently.
it's in Facebook. So I'm trying to find it again.
ask you?
Hard, but yeah, I'll dig it out.
Yeah,
They
if you
ask
can
to
dig it
ruin
up
your
and drop
personal
it.
belongings?
Yep.
Like, is that a legal thing? They can ask you to ruin your personal belongings so that way it's safe to fly with? Like, if you put
Right.
them at 30%, it's more of a danger than it is fully charged.
Yeah. Here, let me just fly it around here till it's discharged, and then we'll be good.
Yeah, exactly. And then open up air maps and be like, NFC, sorry, can't do it.
I know when I flew with my with all my drone equipment. I did put them all to storage charge, but
Yeah.
that's about the max I did because, I mean, anything beyond that is going to risk damaging your batteries. Ah, there we go. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that.
They probably don't have anything for reference, so they just went with 30% because that's for,
Yeah.
it probably worked for something else, so they just kind of grandfathered it in.
Yeah, research is hard, so.
Well, also that, I mean, is that singling out lithium-ion batteries, and then we can just tell them, be like, it's not necessarily a lithium-ion battery. It's not the same that you're thinking of.
It's graphene.
It's a polymer. It's not an ion.
It's graphene.
Exactly.
Oh,
It's a
there you
magical
go.
unicorn battery. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine.
Okay. Somebody taxiing an aircraft there?
Doing some shrink wrap.
Okay. All right. Wow. All right. So cargo ban. Well, wow. So get your batteries in country apparently. Otherwise, you're gonna get hosed on the price.
And don't fly with them, apparently. I mean, that would kill an entire industry, and it seems like they don't really seem to care.
They don't.
Yeah, this is cargo planes, so this is all safety measure. FAA has been pushing airlines to reconsider carrying batteries due to the potential fire risk. So when's the last time we had a lithium ion fire on an airplane? Anybody remember one? Because I sure as hell don't.
Samsung Note 7, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, cell phone battery. Oh yeah. Okay.
So what does that mean?
They have a whole trigger.
Yeah, so what are they going to do? Tell everybody that we need to look at your phone and make sure it's at 30% before you get on the plane? Come on.
Or just ban them all together. No phones.
Yep.
Yeah, just only a couple years after they said, "Hey, you can use your phones on airplanes now." Wow. Okay, well that's fancy. What else? What else we got, guys?
I threw up a link on that video. It finally uploaded.
Woohoo! Check that
Any
out.
other interesting news that happened this week?
What was that? What was that date? April something or other regarding the test?
Yeah, April 3rd. So April 3rd. Here's a couple of the upcoming deadlines. I'll just read a couple of them out for you. So applications for designation of no-fly zones. That's coming up March 31st. And for the most part, that's probably going to be power, like utility, transport facilities, like, obviously airports, but train, bus, yada yada yada, stadiums, and probably amusement parks and whatnot. So I'm hoping that that's going to be the limit, the same stuff that we're used to. Hopefully I can get some more information on that. They're supposed to be rolling that stuff out here shortly.
There's Zoe.
Let's see. We've got aeronautical knowledge test and safety, or knowledge and safety test, recognition of community-based organizations. So that's coming up. So how they're going to actually recognize CBOs. The private UAS privacy review. Study on Department and Emergency Service Agency use, assessment of aircraft registration. So they're going to re-look at how we're registering our drones. I'm curious if they're just going to take the 250 gram limit away and just make everything, but we'll see. And rules for federal and local authorities. That's all on April 3rd. We've got June 2nd, which is a review of counter UAS interagency coordination processes. That's June 2nd. An update of the FAA comprehensive plan on UAS. Use of UAS at institutions of higher education, radio spectrum, and commercial and governmental operators. That's going to be July 2nd. So that's the next upcoming couple of events here with the FAA.
So Josh, Jimmy Fingers posted a question there in the chat.
Oh, let me see it.
I was going to ask about that. That's abhorrent.
Okay, so no, there's no requirement to put your AMA number on your aircraft.
Maybe by AMA standards, though.
Yeah, it might be, but there's no, absolutely not. You don't need to put that on there. You do have to have your federal registration number, though.
But remember, if you don't have your AMA number on your drone and you crash, they're probably not going to give you your money for your insurance because it didn't have the number.
That
I
number
need to
was
have an AMA.
scratched.
Yeah, I need to have an AMA number or an AMA membership to have a number to put on my craft.
Or it burned up in the lipo fire.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
there you go.
All right, Jimmy, I'm gonna look at this. I'll look at this AMA blog real quick after we're done here, just because it's kind of long. But I don't. Wow. Yes, you need to list both your AMA and federal registration number on your aircraft. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. I mean, maybe if you're flying as part of the AMA. So.
Yeah, that's from the AMA's website from the first
Yeah.
line.
But.
Should I put my NRA membership number on there as well, since basically they're doing the same thing?
Oh boy. All right, what else we got? Zoe, you got anything, ma'am?
No, I'm just coming into this thing late, having a rough day. Don't really have much to add.
I'm sorry you're having a rough day. It's almost over.
Thank God.
All right, guys. I don't have anything else, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Dan, you got anything?
No, my only question would be is if this night of the week is the best night for this kind of thing, since I know there's at least 2 other related live streams that happen Wednesday nights. We did get more people in here today than we ever have before, which is great, though. So maybe it does work.
Is this night and time good for you guys?
That works for me.
Okay.
Yep, same here. I just gotta remember to turn notifications back on. I always forget.
Yep. Turn those back on.
I just happened to be editing a video. That's how I saw it this time.
Well, all right. So every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, we are having these. So if you want to participate, and believe me, we appreciate it. I've got a lot of good ideas from you guys this evening. So please, please, please keep that stuff coming. Every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time, we'll be having these. I've got topics lined out for each week. So, and we can just keep adding to it. And if you guys have any suggestions of topics, hit them out. So,
I have just like one question. It's kind of related because it's on top of the AMA.
yeah.
What is everyone's opinions on the AMA? Just like a core breakdown in one sentence.
They're fudge. Yeah, they don't give a shit about us, and they've proven it time and time again. And that's kind of why we're in this position right now, because if they had stepped up and said something years ago, then they just don't represent us at all. They don't want to represent us from the sound of it.
I guess the question is like, how would it be, or what world and what would need to be done in order to convince the AMA to represent us? And then on that note, what would the AMA have to do to actually show the community that they're trying to move forward in a positive way with FPV?
Well, I don't know what it would take to get them to represent us adequately because taking our money wasn't enough. Like, what else do they need? Blood?
Probably.
Yeah.
But it's like a serious question because like the only reason I bring it up is the FPVFC definitely needs to exist because, and the only, my opinion, reason why we exist is because the AMA hasn't really represented us to the best of their abilities and to the abilities that we've needed them to. So the thing is, though, is they're still the biggest group in the United States, and I know for a fact that there's definitely a couple people on staff that do care about FPV and do want to try to make it right and try to figure out the best ways to help the community. So that's why I bring up, how can the AMA make it better? What could they do? If you had one thing to tell them on how to make it better, what would it be?
I think
Support
the
the
first
Freedom
part.
Coalition. Support this group.
honestly, I mean, I think part of that's right, Steve. I think, but I almost want to say, Zoe, and I don't know that I speak for everybody, but I feel like the AMA has kind of burned that bridge, um, and run screaming from it. But I think the biggest part for a lot of people would be universal acceptance of of FPV. I feel like they have done everything in their power to just keep pushing us to the margins, and their members hate us. Especially their older crowd, they hate us. Without any kind of change from that front, I don't think they're gonna see acceptance from the FPV community.
What they
That's
could
very
do
well
is,
said.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off,
no,
though.
go for it, Gravy. This is
I
a
think
safe space.
I think the best thing that they could probably do is admit that they're not the leading knowledge source in this thing as a CBO once we get to that point, and direct any and all questions towards us instead of them making statements that are going to hinder it even more. Because everything that they say about drones is going to hinder all RC aircraft. And I feel like they're not realizing that by calling one group or one type of RC flying bad, and everything else is good though. They need to just admit defeat and say that they don't know what they're talking about.
I would love
That's
nothing more for them to remember where they came from. I mean, they got their start 80 years ago for the same freaking reason that we're here now.
right.
I mean, think about it. Yeah, it was 80 years ago, but people didn't understand what RC model aircraft were, and they
Right.
freaked out. And then laws were getting changed, and people were getting in trouble. And they were like, "Hey, we've got to do something about this. We need to form a group that can explain this to people and make it right." The AMA was born.
And that's a very healthy point. The AMA is multi-generational, and they could very well have lost that whole ideal.
Absolutely.
So,
Don't
You
forget
know,
where you came from, and don't crap on new kids coming into the game.
I
I mean,
think
here's the
it'll
thing: is go ahead, Dan.
I think it'll be nearly impossible for the AMA as a CBO to work with the FAA and come up with a list of their safety guidelines for all of their types of flying that the AMA represents and balance that in a way that works. They're going to have to lean more towards their traditional user base, where we can be a CBO with a different set of guidelines focused just on the FPV pilots. So that's where I see the AMA just can't really represent us in that same way.
Well, they accept special organizations, like you get a special organization designation or special whatever the crap it is. Um, and I think that that's probably how they fill those gaps, because you can't know everything. Um, and you're not you if it's not in the forefront of your mind, you're not even going to think about it, which is we're kind of the forgotten ones. But um, that's something that we could look into. I don't know how everybody would feel about that though. If we were a recognized special interest organization with the AMA, what everybody tell me, like, how do you feel about that? Because if it's no, then there's no reason why we have to go through the entire process.
I guess I'll start. I feel like there's a divide in the community right now, and it's partially on the AMA side. It's partially on the government side with the regulations, and I honestly think there's some good people within the AMA. They just don't know how to go about it. So, coming from the point of trying to work with them and trying to clear the confusion on their end, so we can all have a united front with the FAA versus having two special interest groups that are independently maneuvering, I think adds a lot more vocality to us. Like we stand stronger with them at our shoulder, with us still being independent and be able to even directly tell the AMA, hey, look, that policy that you're thinking about putting out, that's going to hinder things in the end. To be able to have that kind of go between could be very healthy. But I do know, I mean, I know personally, seeing how some people have been treated at AMA Fields, how that's created a rift in the community. But I know like Bob and Matt and Claire, and even there's some really good people within the AMA that do care about us new kids on the block, it's just a matter of making sure that the new kids on the block have a say in how they move forward. And I quite honestly think the AMA is trying, they just don't know how. And might be good for us to give them that guidance.
Well, and I think that, I think the general consensus here earlier was that, you know, we need to work cordially with them. We need to communicate with them. We need to be able to work professionally with them. But are we a part of them? I think that's where you kind of draw the line. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But I think you're right, Zoe. And it's not that there's not good people in the AMA. It's just as a whole organization, I feel
Not
like
enough of them.
I feel like they've forgotten where they came from, kind of like Stephanie was saying. I feel like they've done a good job up until now, but they haven't done a good job adapting to the new technologies, which blows my mind because it's a pure technology field that they are a special interest group in, and they should be able to adapt like the wind on that kind of thing.
Ha, the pun. But yeah, no, it's true. It's true. They should be able to adapt, and because they haven't been able to adapt right, we do exist. Well said. Well, thank you for letting me poke your brain on that, guys. So I've been thinking a lot about it, and I was kind of curious what y'all are thinking on it. Because realistically, we need a united front in some way to be able to deal with all the issues, and having the AMA say one thing that's not in line with what we're saying, and simultaneously not necessarily with what we're saying is in line with what they're saying, is not always great for all of us overall.
Yeah, I don't think we should be bickering between us. I think we should work professionally and united. I just think that we as a community are the subject matter experts on this kind of stuff.
Yep. I just hope there's a way for the subject matter experts to actually talk to the ones that aren't, and for a little bit of that information sharing to happen.
Absolutely, I completely agree.
I do know a lot of people seem to be afraid that as things change in the future, that the AMA would sort of say cave to the FAA and say, all right, we'll change all the rules. We won't fly anywhere except for our fields, and that's okay because we have these fields everywhere, and that's great. If that were to happen, people like us would be very upset. And there's no indication that that's going to happen, but that's a fear people have.
I can understand that because that's kind of where we are right now. I mean, their insurance doesn't cover you unless you're on an AMA sanctioned field. So they've already said, okay, we'll give you this concession. Okay, how about you let us do this? But if we just do it where it's like our space and it's our, we can control it. Oh yeah, that's fine, that's cool. I think that's probably how that came in because there's a lot of negotiation when it comes to stuff like this. Like, what are you willing to give up so that you can at least get this, and this? Because the FAA is not, they don't make decisions lightly, ever.
Yeah, but I don't know. Every member that I've talked to seems that is not in FPV pilot wouldn't have any problem agreeing to that. That's and they're gonna cater to what the majority says, I think. So
Well, and I think the other fear behind some of this stuff is not just restricting us to dedicated fields, but that the fields that are around us don't accept FPV. So it's kind of like this double-edged sword. Yes, you can fly here. Come fly here. Except you guys. You guys can't fly here.
No,
and
well, they're boring too.
Yeah, we'll take your money, but you can't fly here. So
yeah, and so it just doesn't make sense. And I mean, furthermore, I think the beauty of FPV, and I think everybody here will agree, is being able to explore your environment. Who cares about a field? I mean, let's go out, let's see the scenery, let's see the mountains, let's see the city, let's do these things. That gives us another view of this world we live in and the beauty of it, and that's the entrancing part about all this, at least for me. And being stuck to one location to do this kind of stuff just makes no sense.
Well, in a boring location as well. Yeah, that's my point.
So
Well said. Well, I'm hoping some members of the AMA might be listening in. If they do, they have better perspective.
Yep.
So, right on.
So, anywho, on that note, unless anybody has anything, we passed our time. And happy
I'm
to
sorry.
stay if anybody want. No, you're fine, Zoe. Completely fine. If anybody else has anything that they want to talk about, I'll stick around. That's all the content I have for this evening. But if you guys want to continue talking, feel free. I'll be here. I'll be here to answer questions or chime in where need be. Otherwise, good night. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Oh, somebody had a dog.
Somebody's dog has a question.
Yep.
I heard.
Well, thanks everyone.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you, y'all.
Night, you guys.
Night, John boy.